for those of you that don't know, I'm Tim Paul. I'm the director of bands at IUP. And during the fall, we're having conversations of how do we get the word out during this pandemic and to let people know we're okay, they're okay, and how can we help? And so we started thinking about it. And I asked the students, if you're looking up information, I'm not saying this is how you do research, but if you're looking up information, I said, well, we look in Wikipedia. And my thought was, how can IUP be kind of the Wikipedia of musical knowledge? How could we start doing clinics like this or have help sessions to bring people together that when they need something that they would look to IUP? And so what we envisioned, and it started out now, is Music for All series, the IUP Music for All series. And with that said, we had people apply for it, and then to do that, and Dr. Flowers had this fantastic idea. And being in the faculty meeting when he was asked a question, well, wait, no, I probably shouldn't. We're being recorded. Okay. So, but quick-witted, as quick-witted, he is that much and more as a player teacher. And it's an honor to have him and here at IUP and call him a colleague and friend. And I don't need to talk more because we want to hear what he has to say, because what a great topic. Please, let's welcome him. And then you can either do it on your reactions where it's a thumbs up, or we can just clap for him. Dr. Flowers.
Awesome. Thank you all. Good to see you all here. Before I get rolling, I wanted to make sure that I thank Dr. Paul for setting this up, and Dr. Rosemary Engelstad as well, and of course our chair, Dr. Balmer, for all of his support with everything that we do. So thank you all very much, and thank you guys for being here. I thought I would take a little bit different approach with this than maybe what people normally do. I'm going to assume, and based on the names that I see here, a base level of knowledge. So I'm not necessarily going to break down the finer points of embouchure, as much fun as that sounds like. What I want to do is talk about some of the most easy, most helpful things that you can do to either help your saxophone sound or your students' sound. So what I want to start off with here, we are going to talk about embouchure just a little bit, but we're not going to dig into the finer details. The things that I've found that are the most important over the years is one of the big things is embouchure tension. And what I like to do to make sure that people aren't putting too much pressure on the reed is a couple different things, because that is where all of our sound is going to come from. If that reed can't vibrate, then you're not going to be able to get a good sound. So if you're working out alto, we want to hear a nice round sound. And you should be getting somewhere around an A flat concert or so. There is a little bit of flexibility. So you can hear even there, even if the pitch, even if you're not so sensitive to the pitch, the tone is centered whenever you're playing that A flat too. It gets pinched if you're too high, and it sounds kind of flat and wompy, as I like to say, if you're too open too, which for younger players normally is less of a problem. More often than not, they're too tight. So grabbing an A flat on the neck is helpful. For my older students, after they've been playing for a while and they've got a little bit of extra embouchure strength and they're moving some good air, I like to get an A on the mouthpiece. A-ish. I'm probably a little bit on the flat side, but that's kind of where I like to put my sound. And then finally, the last thing that is super helpful, especially if you're teaching a lot of fifth, sixth graders, what you'll hear is something like this. And by the time they get down to that C, they're popping up into the upper register. So one of the things that I'll do for that is have them play an F. And then what they should be able to do is bounce the octave key. And if you're not in a pandemic, then you can reach over and touch the octave key for them. And you should be able to hear that easily switch between registers without any adjustment here at all. If they're too tight, it'll either stay in the upper register or you can hear how it's kind of responding slowly to me, so that means I'm still a little bit too tight. And vice versa, if I'm too loose and too open, then it's going to stay in the lower register the whole time. And it doesn't matter what I do with the octave key. It stays down there. So if you want to check their embouchure tension, pitch of the neck and the mouthpiece, you're looking for an A flat. On alto saxophone, on the mouthpiece, checking the mouthpiece, making sure that you got around an A concert. Most people, whenever they start playing, they'll get somewhere around a B or a B flat. I'm sure a lot of us have heard that sound before. So just open it up a little bit more. Sometimes a little bit more corner action is going to help something like that. So that'll get you going with the embouchure tension. Playing in the low register, like I said before. The F thing is a good way to get going. Also to make sure to help them find enough air. That's always a big problem. If they're not using enough air whenever they're playing, those low notes are going to be a real problem for them too. So to make sure that people are using enough air, I like to think about using low B flat air all the time. And a good way to start off with that is not using any tongue. Oh, geez, I'm sorry. Fort Wayne, Indiana. I don't even know anybody in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Sorry about that. So low B flat air. And what's nice about that is if you're imagining that their air is traveling all the way through the horn, that air has got to be pretty fast and strong to get all the way to their low B flat. And it's a little bit easier to cheat with it if you use your tongue. We don't want that. No cheating allowed. So I like to start off with just a nice strong air attack. Because if you don't use enough air, you might even get a different partial too. So that's a good way to check air. If you got that and you've got the appropriate embouchure tension, like I was talking about with the F, that'll be no problem for you at all. And to me, this is really important because I can't tell you how many times over the years I have heard people say, well, if you're going to play low, you got to drop your jaw. And I would much rather think about playing every note like a low B flat, because that's going to give you a nice round sound all up and down the horn. And you can even hear, if I drop my jaw whenever I'm playing down there, there's that wompy saxophone sound that we've all heard before. And in fact, the other thing I like to do for our saxophonists out there is raise my tongue just a little bit, which is also going to help my airspeed. And still help me keep a focused sound down there. That way, not only does my note come out, but it also sounds good too, which is definitely preferable. So we got the fast air, play every note like a low B flat. And then finally, the last thing to get everybody's embouchure set up right is how much mouthpiece do I or my students have in our mouths. So one thing, a good place to start to check that out is we want to find the fulcrum. And you'll see here on your screen where I've got my arrow pointing is there's a place where the reed and the mouthpiece meet. And I like to have my top teeth about in line with that point. And then from there, you can move in and out based on how things sound. So a lot of times, if you've got somebody in fifth grade, you guys are seeing all this, right? No. Oh, man. Let's see. Oh, maybe now. How about now?
Yeah.
All right. Man, I had all that cool stuff going on and you guys didn't even know. Lame. Okay. So we're looking at how much mouthpiece we got there. And you're trying to find the fulcrum on the mouthpiece where the reed and the mouthpiece meet. Your top teeth are going to line up right there. Because what happens a lot of times, especially with younger players, either they'll take not enough in and they'll get a sound like this. Partially because it's a lot easier to bite then. But also that's dampening the vibration of the reed again. And if you go the other way and have too much mouthpiece in your mouth, and then next thing you know, your band director's yelling at you all the time for playing too darn loud. So, if your saxophones are getting that really bright, brassy, spread kind of sound, that is probably one of the first things that you want to check. And then once you got, if you're not too sure where that fulcrum is and you want to have a trick that they can try too, is to see it really clearly. If you stick a piece of paper in between your reed and your mouthpiece, it'll only go in as far as where the fulcrum is. So that's a good way to get a visual example of where exactly that is. And one thing to keep in mind is that it's different on every mouthpiece, it's different on every saxophone. And that's one of the reasons why you can't play a baritone saxophone the same way that you would play an alto saxophone. If I take the same amount of mouthpiece in whenever, if my baritone saxophone mouthpiece is that big and my alto saxophone mouthpiece is that big, I'm not going to get the right kind of sound. That reed is not going to be able to vibrate the way we want it to. So if you're picking up a tenor saxophone or a baritone saxophone, that's a great thing to check too. Where is that fulcrum, and am I taking in enough mouthpiece so that my teeth are in line with that point? Let's see here. Yeah, that was my embouchure page. So we already saw all that. But you guys have never seen one of those guys play the saxophone before. Oh yeah, we should make sure that we see that too. Let's see here. And we are almost to where we need. There we go. Okay, so now we got embouchure out of the way. Next up, uh, posture are good things to check, especially for your younger students. Um, for most alto players, if they've got a small body, so like a fifth grader or something like that, uh, it's good to have them have their horn off to the side, and it's going to be resting on their leg, on the side of their leg. But the main thing that you want to look for is that the saxophone is still going almost straight into their mouth. You know, for them to be comfortable, a lot of times they'll put the back of the horn practically like that, and next thing you know, they've got that kind of angle going on. And again, that's going to dampen the vibration of the reed. So we want the horn to go straight, almost straight into their mouth, whether it's off to their side or whether it's in front of them. And probably the main exception to that is I know a lot of jazz guys actually like to play with their neck strap a little bit lower so that they've almost are blowing down into the saxophone instead of straight into it. So that also is a good thing to check out. Now, one of the easiest fixes is equipment. And because a lot of times what happens is people will play on whatever their stock mouthpiece is clear up through high school. And more often than not, that is making things way more difficult for them than what it needs to be. And it's also affecting their sound too. They're not going to sound real great. So I got a treat for you guys. Because what I brought with me, just to hear what that kind of sound is going to be like, I brought the stock mouthpiece from my very first saxophone whenever I was in fifth grade, and a 1.5 reed, which is always included with the horns, right? That's what comes with the horn free. So before I do that, before I assault your ears like that, I want you, I'll play a scale for you on my setup so you got an idea how it sounds first, and then I'll put this other one together. So now that you got that in your ear, here's my my stock plastic mouthpiece, my stock ligature. Although, unlike most fifth graders, it looks like it hasn't been stepped on yet, so we're doing pretty good. And then my 1.5 Rico reed. I'll get us lined up there. And I know there's a lot of suspense out there right now. But here we go. This is what it sounds like. So everything else is the same. I'm using, the same air, same embouchure. Sounds pretty rough, right? I don't even know if I would identify that as a saxophone if I just heard it. And you can hear how the sound stops every now and then because the reed is closing off because it's not hard enough to resist even the slightest bit of pressure here. So for that reason, even my beginning students, I always started them on number 2 reeds. Rico is still fine because, their first year, they're going to destroy multiple reeds, probably even in a day, let alone a week. So they don't need to be spending more money. Their parents don't need to be spending more money on better quality reed. But by the time it seems like they've figured out how to deal with those a little bit better, I would move them on to probably a Van Dorn classic, like the Blue Box or something like that. 2 or 2.5, in part because the Van Dorn reeds always run about a half a size or so harder. So if I'm playing on a number 2.5 Rico reed, if I want a similar feel, I'm going to play a number 2 Van Dorn reed. So that half size difference is going to be helpful. So that's what a stock mouthpiece sounds like. And you know, depending on what kind of community that you live in or what kind of parents you're dealing with, you know, not everybody's got $150 to blow on a mouthpiece. And whenever they're not sure how long their kid's going to play on it. So even with the 1.5 reed, what I have here now is a height premier mouthpiece. And those you can normally get somewhere between a $30 and $40. And I'll show you what the difference is there. So even then, it's still not it's not great, but it sounds significantly better. It's not closing off as much. It actually kind of sounds like a saxophone. Now what I have is I've upgraded to a Van Dorn Blue Box 2.5. And that actually doesn't sound too bad. That sounds more or less like a saxophone. So just those couple small differences can give your students a huge advantage. Upgrading to that high premier mouthpiece and playing on half decent reeds can help them out immensely. And the other thing, even between the stock mouthpiece and the height mouthpiece, the stock mouthpiece was hard to blow through. Even with a 1.5 reed, it felt very resistant. But the height, it feels very easy to blow through it. So I'm not having to work nearly so hard to get a decent sound. So now, the reed thing, which is the bane of all of our existence. I already mentioned some of the things that can help with just upgrading your reed. It can also help a lot to adjust how you're putting it on. So I like to make sure, first of all, if I'm just starting off and I'm not really sure what my reed is like, if I put it on and I like to press on the reed just a little bit till I can see a sliver of black there from the tip of the mouthpiece. Then I know that I'm lined up pretty well. Because if it's too high or too low, that's going to really affect the way it plays too. And also making sure that it's lined up side to side, of course. And the other thing that helps a lot is if we look at our mouthpiece, you can see there's a window here, and that is where the reed and the mouthpiece come together and create a seal. So a lot of times, if I only, put that much reed in my mouth and get that much of the reed wet, that means this whole section that is touching the mouthpiece is not going to seal well against the mouthpiece. And if it doesn't seal well, then I'm going to have an airy sound. So a lot of times I'll even take the back of the reed just to make sure that all the way down there is wet and I'm getting a good seal. And then after that happens, if I've still got a good amount of air in my sound, I also like to do the pop trick. And for the pop trick, to help get yourself a better seal, I'll close the bottom of the neck up, and then I'll suck all the air out like I've got a really thick milkshake. And if I've got a reed that's sealing good, this one's not cooperating very well. My 2.5 Van Dorn. Maybe if I push it up a little bit, that'll help. All right, can you guys hear that pop there? And the longer it takes to pop, the better the seal is. And I always find that there's a little bit less air in my sound too. And especially down low, if I've got a good seal happening. Let's see. And then finally, the other thing that can help your students a lot, or you, is if you're one of those people that throws your horn in the case and you're done for the day without taking your reed off, that is also a bad idea, because that window of the mouthpiece that I was talking about, as your reed dries out, it's actually going to swell into that hole there, and it's going to be make it even harder to play on. So you want to make sure that you always take your reed off of the mouthpiece whenever you're done for the day. That alone will make them last a lot longer, and it'll make them sound much better too. Let's see here. And then finally, last but not least, the last thing, if you don't want to sound like a lawnmower whenever you play the saxophone, you got to make sure that you have good sounds in your ear to begin with, so that you're surrounding yourself every time you listen to the saxophone recordings, that it's your favorite sounds, and that you've got good models to listen to all the time. So that's very helpful. Also, if you're working on any pieces like Glasnov Concerto, for instance, there's a ton of great recordings of that, and it's very helpful to even play along with them and try and blend with those good sounds, especially once you really get it under your fingers, and you can play as fast as they are with the recording, as they are on the recording. That can help you a lot too. And one of the other things that I have found very helpful is, whenever I'm doing that, to have a pair of those headphones that fit over your ears. Because what is really great about that is it blocks some of your sound out, and you can just focus on listening to the sound of the person that you're trying to blend with. Because it's a funny thing. If you can hear yourself, you're only going to try and blend more with yourself, and you're just going to sound more like yourself. So if you're going to take the time to play along with the recording, then that's an extra step to make sure that it's really effective, making sure that you have a pair of those headphones that fit over your ears. And then the last thing that can be helpful is to play with people better than you. Whether it's a teacher or whether it's your peers that you feel like play really well, if you get together and play duets with them, or play in quartets, anything like that can be very, very helpful. So I also want to leave you with some good recordings, good people to check out. If you want to listen to some good classical saxophonists, Good places to start are Don Cinta, who was professor of saxophone at the University of Michigan for years and years, and then his student Tim McAllister, who is teaching there now. Those are great places to start. Fred Hemke, he was at Northwestern for a long time. You guys have probably come across his reeds before. Eugene Rousseau also taught a lot of some of the top teachers that are out there today. Claude DeLong, he's the Paris Conservatory saxophonist. James Umble, he's one of my teachers at Youngstown State. Still has one of my favorite tones that I've heard. Arno Bornkamp, and if you want to check out some quartets, the Habanera Saxophone Quartet is one of my favorites. Prism Saxophone Quartet, which Tim McAllister is a part of. And then if you want to hear saxophone fit with other instruments, the Califax Reed Quintet is really fantastic. And it's great to hear the saxophone be able to blend with all of these different sounds. So I would highly recommend checking that out. Jazz-wise, of course, Johnny Hodges, who spent years playing with Duke Ellington, Charlie Parker, Lester Young on tenor, John Coltrane on tenor, Cannonball Adderley on alto, Sonny Rollins on tenor. And if you're looking for some more recent players, some younger guys, although Chris Potter is probably about 50 now, so I don't know if he's super young anymore. But definitely check out Chris Potter, Kenny Garrett, who played with Miles Davis near the end of his career. So he's definitely a guy to check out. So just if you don't know what a saxophone is going to sound like, is supposed to sound like, what it's capable of, then there's really no way for you to be able to produce a better sound. So I can't encourage you and your students enough to make sure that you got good sounds in your ears all the time. Let's see here. And I think that that's pretty much everything. So if anybody has any questions, I am happy to hear some.
Not that I want to start, but I have a couple questions for you. And just from, and I don't know how many teachers we have out, but there have been plenty of teachers out there. But a lot of times, like for my students, when they go out to teach and they're starting, they have a beginning band, there's nothing wrong with talking to the music store to say, here's the mouthpiece that I want as a beginning mouthpiece. And the when you think about over the rental period of owning the sax, that $30 mouthpiece, $30 to $40 over the 2 years is not that much difference in the price. And for them to have a better sound and a better experience, I think it's worth that investment to start out there. But,
I agree, 100%.
What about ligature wise?
Ligature wise, that seems a little bit trickier and a little bit more of personal preference.
Got it.
I like the Charles Bay ligatures a lot. They're getting harder and harder to get all the time, especially the covered ones. Those are my favorite. If you look at mine, you can see that there's a little bit of material on the inside. And for me, that makes for a better seal and also takes off some of the higher partials. So it gives me a little bit warmer, darker sound. So that's what I like. And it's probably a little bit less important until people start getting pickier with their sounds. Like high school maybe is a good time to start upgrading ligatures, I think.
I'm sorry, but I have other questions too. When you're talking about the seal, And the pop is just one of the things where if they can't get it to seal and they've adjusted the height of it, then you need to go see your band director. Is,
It's
is,
probably a good idea.
does that mean like it could be warped or something because they left it on the mouth?
Right, yeah. Chances are it's going to be pretty warped if you can't get any kind of pop on it. And at that point, you could either take some sandpaper to it if you're a little bit more advanced and want to get into that. Or actually, uh, if you're playing a lot and you've played on that reed quite a bit, oh, which I should also maybe talk about rotating a little bit too, which is helpful. Um, then you'll get some gunk, for lack of a better term, uh, on the bottom of the reed, and even just taking your fingernail and scraping it off a little bit, that can do a world of good for the seal of that reed. Now the rotating thing, I would encourage everybody to have maybe 4 or 5 reeds, at the bare minimum 3, even for somebody that's in 5th or 6th grade, so that they're playing on a different reed every time that they've put the horn in their mouth. The reed will last longer that way. It'll sound better, and it'll also be in a more stable state if you're not playing it constantly. So just having a bunch of reeds going at the same time, so that every time you play, you've got a different one, can help a lot.
I've seen some students with reeds like it's a badge of honor that I have this reed since I started in the 5th grade and they're juniors in high school. And you think, no wonder you sound like you sound right now. But so the average life of a reed, playing wise,
Oh, I don't even know if I could. I
that's a
have
tough
no idea.
question, isn't it?
That is a tough question. I mean, I I am probably an exception to the rule. I would say I go through a box or two a year. um, but that's because I'm switching them all the time. I'm switching between jazz and classical. Maybe I'm playing clarinet too. So it would be different if I was maybe playing just classical saxophone all the time. And every time I was picking up my horn, I was using those reeds. So mine tend to last me for a long time.
But I mean, that reinforces what you're saying. The more you rotate the reeds, the longer the reeds last you
Yeah,
versus play one till it wears out and then another one till it wears out. You're extending the life by creating that rotation process.
exactly.
Got it. Do you have any preference equipment wise? Well, I shouldn't get into that.
Yeah, I could talk about that. What I play on for classical are Van Dorn Optimum AL3 mouthpieces and Van Dorn number 3.5. And I mentioned my Charles Bay ligature before. For jazz, I like to use another Van Dorn mouthpiece also. It's the V16, and it's the small chamber. I think it's called S7 Plus right now. That's my alto mouthpiece that I use. And then I like Francois Louis reeds. He makes nice jazz reeds.
Do you think the neck strap matters for beginning saxophonists?
That's a great question. Well, probably the big thing it depends on is some of those neck straps. I'm not sure what brand that they are, but they're kind of stretchy. So whenever you put the horn on them, uh, you'll reach the point where it's taut, and then it'll stretch even further. So then it makes it difficult to gauge exactly where it's going to be, and it probably changes over time too. So this one, there's no give to. So I know that it's going to be the same every time that I put it in my mouth. So I want to say they're maybe some of the ProTech neck straps, and they've got those big foam pads in the back, and kids like them because they're comfortable because they don't dig into their neck, but they also are stretchier. So for that reason, they're not real great.
And I feel like the kids have a hard time like manipulating the length of those ones. Like they
Mm.
can't figure out how to pull it up or adjust it down. It's like stuck here and it's going to be here forever.
Yeah, it is pretty tricky for sure. Unfortunately, I don't think I have anything that I can recommend off the top of my head. I'm using the Adjust Joe's right now, which has uh, he put some Dr. Scholl's gel
That's too funny.
under here, so it's pretty comfy. And then the hook on it is pretty intense, so it's not going anywhere.
That's actually really smart because I've witnessed those breaking or coming unsnapped, and there's never a good outcome from that.
No. I actually had that happen to me in jazz band in undergrad. I was playing baritone saxophone, and the neck strap broke, and it came back, and it actually cut my lip open. Um, it was very painful.
Mm, 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 mm. Wow. Well, I think that's a question. Anybody else have questions? Lots of silence, which, silence is either good or bad, but we don't have to worry about that part of it. If we don't have questions, I'd like this to clap for Dr. Flowers and thank him for sharing with us. Wait, Anthony's saying something. Anthony, do you not want to talk? You afraid to talk? You won't even show your face. Are you embarrassed, Anthony?
No, I'm doing librarian work right now.
Okay, okay. I'm just checking.
Oh, what a guy.
Do you want to ask your question so I don't have to read it?
Sure. I was just wondering if you have any recommendations for good solo repertoire for younger students, like if they wanted to take private lessons outside of just like typical band class,
Like, how young are we talking?
like middle school, high school.
Middle school, probably any of those soloist folios, like what Rubank has or something like that. Those are normally good places to start. Some of my favorite pieces for like seventh, eighth grade, some uh, Jean Baptiste Sangelet pieces. Those are good places to start. He's got a concertino, I think, and a couple other things. The Rueff Chanson et Passepied is a classic. Um, let's see. And normally after that, I like the Haydn Diversion too. I've had younger students work on that. Heiden.
Nice horn concerto too for
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Good
I-
question.
And Anthony, while you're still there, and for everybody else, this is just the beginning of us doing those talks. What are some of the talks that you all would like to see and hear? Are there any subjects that you excuse me, that you like to hear or suggest? I mean, this is for everybody out there. It's not for us. I mean, we're trying to connect with everybody. What do you want? What do you need?
Um, Probably like brass maintenance. I teach full beginning bands here in Anchorage, so that one is always a little tricky, knowing what to do with my brass students in that regard.
I think
Angela, if you even want us to get together, we can Zoom that, and I would even be willing to do that with your class and talk about different things.
Oh, that would be cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's not, we just have the time difference. That's it. But yeah, or we can get somebody else. I don't have to hog it. Anthony, you were going to say something else?
I would say any sort of like small maintenance things I think would be great for all instruments, because usually you only really know how to fix your own horn. Uh, so I think anything like that would be great. And continuing stuff like this where the professors talk about uh, everything that Dr. Flowers did today, I think would be really beneficial for anyone outside or in school.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you for being here. Thanks for the suggestions. And if we, like, even like I was just saying with Angela, if you need us or you have a question, we're just an email away. That's why we're here, to help, and we'll do whatever we can to help everyone. But so thanks for being here. Wish you the very best, and until our next one. See you then.
Good to see you all. Thanks for being here.